7.5, we talked about who is more likely to win this war, at least from our understanding of them at the start in 1914. Germany, allied with Austria and the Ottoman Empire primarily, they have a superior military capability because of Germany's industrialization. Because they're all located together, the central powers, it is easy to orchestrate their efforts. It's easy to have summits and meetings and all of that. But it also means that they are surrounded on two sides by their enemies, the Triple Entente, which is Russia, France, and Great Britain. So one of their advantages is the geography that they have created sort of a Germany sandwich. They can squeeze Germany from two sides. They have the benefit of all of those Russians, except they haven't industrialized, so that is a problem as well. They also have the British Empire, including Canada, South Africa, India, Australia, New Zealand, all of these soldiers that Britain can pull from in order to fight this war. And I like that some people say it looks like Germany should win, other people say it looks like Britain and her allies will win. This war is characterized by the trenches. And if you remember the Schlieffen Plan, that was Germany's plan to avoid a two-front war. They don't want to fight two wars at the same time. So they wanted to knock France out of it quickly because they're France, they're easy to beat. Germany has beat them before. Knock France out of it, and then focus their energies on big old Russia. So this, remember, was the Battle of the Marne. The Germans send a small force over to France to hopefully take over Paris quickly, and they are surprised when the British and French fight back. And so the Germans, rather than retreating all the way, dig trenches and fight. And the British and French are forced to dig trenches as well. Otherwise, they're an open target. So the trench warfare system means that literally and figuratively you have to dig in, and it's about just throwing everything you can at your enemy. Throwing your military power, your weaponry at the other guy. Wars before this point have been about taking over territory and flanking maneuvers. But now, with the trenches, you're essentially underground. It's hard to take over territory if you are beneath it. And so trench warfare, and this entire war is really characterized by these modern weapons, new capabilities, but old-fashioned, outdated tactics. Generals are still stuck in this idea of you have to capture the flag, you have to take the territory. But with the new weapons, there's a conflict. So we went through the organization and the layout of the trenches. You've got no man's land in the middle. Really don't want to go out there because you are an open target. There's lots of barbed wire out there. Hopefully, you're hoping that if your enemy gets across no man's land, he'll get caught in the barbed wire. Then you have the front line trenches. That's where everyone's at the ready, where battles will start from. There are dugouts, meaning little rooms that have been dug out of the earth. Sometimes it would be used for offices, for storage, maybe just enough space to sit and cook your evening meal. Connecting the different trenches, you have a connecting or communication trench. That's sort of the perpendicular line there. Then you have your machine gun. That needs to be set up high because you want to shoot down onto no man's land. You need to use sort of that angle. The support trench will be more where the commanding officers are, where they are making the snap decisions, getting the supplies up to the front lines. And because there are so many officers there, that's why there are deep dugouts, more of the office spaces. In the reserves, this is really just the backups. They're not going to see much action back there. And all the way in the back, the long-range artillery. These are essentially the cannons. And here we have a cross section. There's our barbed wire leading towards no man's land. We're now on the other side of the field. You're going to see parapets or sort of mounds of earth to protect the soldiers. You don't want to build your trenches at 4 feet deep because you will always be exposed. So you want to have enough covering to make sure you are protected, but you also are going to need to shoot out at the other guy. So a parapet, think like a castle. Those sort of jagged teeth on the top of towers. You need a place to hide behind, but you need something open so you can shoot as well. Often parapets were made out of sandbags. Sandbags are important because you're just digging a ditch in the ground. That's dirt. It's not sturdy. So sandbags will provide some sort of construction sturdiness so that all of this doesn't come crumbling down. There you can see a dugout. Again, storage, resting, offices. Because you are fully beneath ground level, you have to step up if you are going to shoot. You don't want to carry everything on you at once, so you get little cubby holes for your ammunition shelf, and an elbow rest to help steady your shot. Then down at the bottom, you have duckboard. These are essentially 2x4s. This is the floor that you are walking on, and they are covering rudimentary drains because there's not really modern plumbing. So you need some sort of basic drainage system for the rain, for the human waste, all of that. So yes, it is a very smelly place to be. So here you can see on the left, that's a very basic trench, but it's been dug quickly. It's just enough to protect their lives. Then on the bottom, this is a more advanced trench. It's been built up. They're using construction techniques. They have better dugouts. As the war lasts longer, the trenches will become more advanced. Over the course of this war, it takes 4 years. It's estimated that about 25,000 miles of trenches were dug. And because they have to be connected, it can become a maze. It can become very confusing. If you don't have any sort of distinguishing factors or landmarks, everything starts to look the same. So oftentimes the soldiers would name their trenches after streets in their hometowns. Again, once the war goes on, they realize this isn't going to be over in a few weeks, and that the artillery plays such a big role. They start using cement blocks or metal siding to build dugouts that will withstand attacks. Also, this war, soldiers aren't spending the entire war in the frontline trench. There's a rotation system between the 3 trenches and then fully time off. So you'd start off in the back, work your way up through the reserve trench, the support trench, and finally the frontline trench. Frontline trench, they really wanted to limit that to just a few days, and then there's lots of downtime. Here is an overhead view, probably around 1915. You can see that dark black area in the middle. That is no man's land. No man's land could range anywhere from 50 yards wide to a mile wide. You can also see the trenches are zigzagged, partly because that is how you can make it sturdier. You can use planks, you can use boards to create these little walls, but more about a shot. If the enemy gets into your trench, you don't want him to have a clear shot and just knock everyone out. So by creating these sort of nooks and crannies, you are protecting yourself. And you can also see all those connecting trenches, and it really becomes like a maze. So the individual soldier in the front line, his rifle has very little effectiveness. If no man's land is a mile long, one gun isn't going to reach very far. So long-range artillery is really the more effective weapon in this war. We're talking bombs, shells, and you're hoping that it reaches your enemy's trench, but it might reach no man's land. And in general, all of this artillery creates what they call a moonscape. This is a photograph from a few years ago, an aerial shot. Once again, you can see the trenches that have grown over. You can see the pockmarked land, like the surface of the moon. Those are left over from shells. Those are shell holes. And here you can see it from our level. Oh, it's so cute. It's so charming. It looks like the Shire. It looks like Middle-earth. But imagine no grass. All the trees have been blown up or have burned or have been knocked down. This looked like a science fiction movie. You would have to make it across all of this with the barbed wire, not get shot, not trip and break your leg into one of the shell holes. Then to get to the other trenches, to get to your enemy, that was pretty rare. So hand-to-hand combat didn't happen very often. Now, if you are going to go into battle, it's called going over the top. Your artillery would be attacking the other trenches, hoping to ruin trenches, kill men, disorient them after nights of bombing. And then you are going to go over the top. You have to climb out of your trench, over the top of your trench, and across no man's land to get to the other side. Most of these attacks are going to take place either early in the morning or right around dusk because low visibility. For the same reason that we don't like driving around 5 o'clock at night or around 7 in the morning. It's difficult to see. It's not quite dark. It's not quite light. you know that if you keep going across no man's land, you will reach the other trench. But it is difficult for the enemy to see you coming. So if you look at the video over to the right, you can see a clip of what it looks like to go over the top. Here's what it looks like. The trenches are open to the sky, so these soldiers can see sky all the time. If they have a chance to pop their heads up, this is what they see. It doesn't even look like Earth anymore. It doesn't look like the beautiful green rolling hills of northeastern France anymore. Now, battles don't happen every single day. There's quite a bit of downtime. So there actually needs to be a pretty strict schedule. Because what happens when you have 19-year-old boys with guns with a lot of time? You have problems. So the general schedule that develops is in the morning at that low visibility time, people need to be at the ready. Stand to means everyone's at battle positions just in case there is an attack. And then your rifle will be inspected by your commanding officer, which means at some point in the day, you'll have to spend time cleaning it, taking it apart, putting it back together. It's a very wet climate. That's why it's so green and lovely. And your gun might become rusty. So you have to spend time doing that. Now, at first, the morning truce doesn't exist. When both sides thought this war would be over quickly, they don't bother with this. But once everyone realized it's lasting a bit longer, they sort of come to this idea that, it's not a good idea to let bodies stay exposed in no man's land for days. They'll start getting gross, they'll start putrefying, there's a nice breeze, which means the smell blows into our trench, and also just out of respect. So eventually around 10 or so in the morning, there'll be a truce, and each side will collect their dead so that they can be buried. Then there's going to be a company inspection. This is sort of roll call. If anyone's missing, well, were they killed in last night's attack? Did they try and run away? Are they sick in the hospital? Keeping track of everyone. And then it's time for chores. There's a lot of upkeep to the trenches. If the trenches are ruined in battle, well, someone needs to repair them. So you're going to fill sandbags, or you're going to build new walls. Or someone needs to shovel out the latrines or the bathroom trench. Lots of things to be done. And finally, in the afternoon, you'll get a chance for some free time. You might write letters home, or read a book, or play chess with someone else. And here's a painting of guys who created an informal school. They were learning French together. Because war can be very boring. And if you have nothing to do, you start thinking. And thinking can be dangerous in war. You start thinking about all of the bad things you've seen, the friends that you've lost. Once again, at dusk, you stand to, just in case there is a battle. And then under the cover of darkness, this is when supplies will be refurbished. You don't want to do it in the middle of the day because, let's say, some boxes are seen overhead, or you don't want to risk losing all of those supplies. Also, there are going to be patrols. Under the cover of darkness, you will try and repair your barbed wire if it's been damaged. You will maybe send spies to see the movements of your enemy, see if they're building trenches somewhere else to try and change their position. Under the cover of darkness is also when a lot of shelling takes place. So there's not a lot of time to sleep. And if you do sleep, it might not be very restful, and that does take a toll on soldiers. So the impact of this style of warfare is pretty severe. One thing is called trench foot. Now this is a war wound that has absolutely nothing to do with battle. It has to do with this moist climate and living underground. Again, there's no drains. There's no sewage system to take away rainwater. So oftentimes you could be standing in water that was a few inches deep, and you have no chance to get dry, and your feet are wet in your boots for days on end. And think of the way your hands get pruny after just an hour in the pool. So if that's for days, your skin actually sort of starts to disintegrate, and so does your flesh, and it gets infected. And oftentimes men would have to have their feet or their legs amputated. There's also actual injuries from battle. A shell hit your trench and part of your leg was blown off, or you poke your head up above the trench and your jaw is shot off. Before this war, if that happened, you would have been a dead man. They didn't have the medical understanding or the medicine to treat you. But now they can treat you. You might be a cripple, you might have to lose your jaw, but you will live. And probably the biggest, most significant injuries are the ones that can't be fixed with a cast or resting or anything. It's the psychological damage, what we would call today PTSD. This war takes a mental, emotional toll on its soldiers, different than before, because of these new weapons. Now, we call it post-traumatic stress disorder, but at the time it was called shell shock. These are men who look fine. They look like everything's okay. They haven't lost any limbs, they have no bullet holes, but they were unable to function. And you'll remember we watched the video in class, and it's over to the right if you want to watch it in Canvas, looking at what shell shock looked like. These men did not know what type of war they were going into. Today, when men go to war, they have a pretty good sense of what that entails. But all of these new weapons and the smells and seeing their best friends being killed and the constant artillery shelling, this takes a mental, emotional toll on soldiers. And the medical community didn't know how to deal with it. But thank God today we have a better understanding of the brain and of medicines that can help trauma like that. And this is the topic of your research paper for this semester. This is called the 1,000-yard stare we see starting on the left in World War I and then World War II and even today. So you're going to look at World War I using the novel, using All Quiet on the Western Front, and then articles already provided for you, already researched for you, about Afghanistan and Iraq veterans.